Ladies and gentlemen, trees and non-binaries, and welcome to another episode of I Am the Night, the show here on DC Comics News Podcast Network, where I, Adam Ray, and my dear father Steve Ray look back at Batman the Animated Series. Welcome back. It feels like it's been a while for us, but it's always good times to talk about Batman, and what a fun and light-hearted but still quite interesting episode to look at. Episode 101 of our show, and we're looking at Season 3, Episode 23. I wish there were 23 seasons of the show. Season 3, Episode 23, titled Chemistry, written by Stan Berkovich and directed by Book Lucic, two titans of the creative team here. And we get to see Batman in ways that I honestly never thought possible. We see Batman lovesick and distracted, but we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Father dear, how did you find this episode?
It was different, but still reminiscent. Obviously, it's been a long time since we recorded because we're very efficient. We get lots of episodes in the can. So we actually recorded our last episode last year, and we're now approaching March 2023 for this one. But it's great to be back recording this series. And this episode, like you said, it's different, a little bit intriguing, fast-paced, great one for the whole family. But I did get vibes. Obviously, it starts with Veronica Vreeland, fourth wedding, which just made me laugh. And
yeah, that sounds for
her. One of her best friends catching the garter, catching the bouquet, and Bruce catching the garter, and seemingly falling in love extremely quickly, which set my spidey senses tingling very early. But that's just me because I'm an ultra nerd. I mean, did you guess quite early on what was happening, or?
I presumed from the green eyes and just the sensible nature of it that a certain pheromone-based enchantress may have been involved, but wasn't quite sure how. And I thought it might have been what it ended up being, false-grown people. But we'll get to that as we cover the rest of the plot of the episode. But yeah, sure enough, we see Batman in a whirlwind romance that just sort of takes him by storm very, very quickly. And he gets to a point where he loves this new woman so much that he might as well retire and leave the Batcave to Nightwing, Tim, and Barbara like he always thought he would. But it's nice to see that he's always, in whatever medium, always been consistent about doing that plan. But there's a lot of things to consider about how he handled that sudden retirement.
I mean, yeah, it was really quick because what scared me the most was not the fact of him falling in love, because honestly, I don't think anyone deserves it more. But his loss of focus as Batman,
yes,
that's when I thought this isn't natural. He hasn't just fallen in love. He isn't just smitten. He is affected. This isn't normal. And what I really loved was the scene in the cave where he's talking to Dick, Bruce, and Tim. And that was very reminiscent of what he said in Mask of the Phantasm when it doesn't hurt so much anymore. I think I can stop doing this. And I got that huge callback to, obviously, for me, still the greatest Batman movie ever made. So I got a lot out of this episode. Even though it wasn't as deep as your Legends of the Dark Knights or your Mad Loves, it still had layers to it and complexity. And as you said, a different take on Bruce and Batman that we have never seen before. And I really felt sorry for the guy by the end.
You kind of have to, because this is a real shot at hope and happiness and retirement that, to all intents and purposes, he really does deserve. Like, I've heard experts on the internet talk about that if Batman were a real person, the physical trauma that he would go through would mean that he would only ever realistically allowed to be Batman for like 3-4 years maximum. So it's always a struggle to sort of imagine someone doing this day after day, year after year. So if any shot he can to try and get out, it works. But the Batman we know would never be this distracted and would never lose his focus that much, because he was there sort of daydreaming about this woman right before him and Tim sort of bust into this jewelry store, pawnbroker's heist gone wrong. And sure enough, it was because there was 4 guys there and he wasn't expecting it, because he wasn't really paying attention. They got the drop on him, which is a rare thing for Batman to say, which is another reason, I think, that motivated him into this retirement in this whirlwind romance.
Absolutely. We never see Batman distracted. That's how I knew this wasn't the actual act of falling in love. I mean, we all get distracted when we're a bit smitten with somebody as standard, but as man as focused as Batman wouldn't lose that kind of his abilities in that level. I mean, to the stage where, I was just blown away to see everything I was seeing and hear everything I was hearing. The speech he gives to the team, And to actually see Bruce Wayne's wedding day is a thing I never thought I'd ever see. The closest we got was Batman 50 when he was jilted at the altar, quite rightly, even though lots of fans are up in arms about it still to this day, by Selina. But the amazing thing to me is again, the level of writing, dialogue and humour in the episode. Again, Stan Berkovich, as you said, one of the titans of the show. The fantastic moment at the wedding where Dick turns to Babs and says, I give it a month. And she goes, what, you don't see it last? He goes, no. Like, to give it a month before he's back in the costume and back in the mask and fighting crime as Batman. And that, to me, was one of the best character moments in a really simple, effective piece of dialogue that I've seen in many years, which is why, to many, this episode might be simple and not quite as great as some of the others, but there's still things like that that still elevate it above most other Saturday morning animated shows for me.
Yeah, because this creative team has been handling these characters for so long, and there's a wealth of other background writing about them that it's easy to sort of like fit the beats of what they would be like. But I thought you'd be more interested in focusing on what was said immediately afterwards. Just like, well, I'm happy for him. Like, you don't ever see that happening. Not going to happen. Like the arm leans and the touches, and just like, I know that you're a big believer in those two characters getting together one day. So I thought that might have been a nice moment for you as well. I thought so too. Well, I read and review Nightwing any month, so right now they are together. So I'll take that. This is an animated series that was created in 1998, and they have still a long way to go ahead of them at that point. But yeah, you know, for me, it's Dick and Babs forever. Absolutely. It was a wonderful moment to see, and even then to show the big ups who make this show also agree with that sentiment. But yeah, let's look a little bit more about how things start to unravel, as it were, in the story of this one. Because sure enough, our good friend Vreeland calls up Bruce in a fit of panic because something seems to have gone wrong with her dream husband. And by the time Bruce gets there, the whole house is on fire, and it's a real scary affair. And we see Bruce, like, not man out of the costume, pulling the heroics, but still, it's a natural thing for us to see because sure enough, we know that he has those skills to be able to handle a burning building. Yeah, absolutely. Costume or no costume, he will always be Batman. He will always be the hero and do the right thing when his friends are in trouble. He thought he'd given up the life, but when Veronica calls, you can see in his eyes, I mean, it's brilliant animation, great storytelling, that you can tell he's concerned. And that, again, raised even more suspicions with me. What woman's going to let their husband go in the middle of their wedding ceremony, in the middle of their wedding reception? Yeah, something did not sit quite true. And as soon as I saw Michael, who married Veronica, her fourth husband, acting very strange, and then obviously we get the massive reveal in her safe room, that's when I thought, yeah, I was right. This has to be a situation involving a very well-known Bat villain. Yes, and sure enough, it was. The actual... I always think of the notion of laser jails from Brooklyn Nine-Nine because that's what it was. But then again, in a world full of sci-fi level tech, it makes sense that that's what safe rooms would look like these days. But it kind of freaked me out a little bit, the fact that he just like stepped through unfazed and there was just like green everywhere. Just like, ooh, okay, that was a really strong visual. Can really get all kinds of people, especially little kids on the Saturday morning effect. There's always a good level of scares and thrills there. So once that event had happened, Bruce was still put back into the Batman mode where he sort of assigned Batgirl and Robin to sort of look in on the husband because he'd caught enough glimpses of his voice and hearing him and the struggle on the phone to know that he was the one that was not to be trusted. So the investigation side was back, and sure enough, it worked well in their part to find out the real source of the issue. Absolutely. And a great stellar acting from everyone involved. The husband, as we'll talk about later, is a guy who's TV and movie royalty in America, who's been working since the 70s and hasn't stopped. So we'll talk about him a bit later. But for me, what I loved about this episode in particular as well is obviously I'm a lot older than you. And I grew up watching reruns of the classic black and white 50s horror and sci-fi movies. And I got a real feel of the classic black and white invasion of the body snatchers from this, and the pod people and taking over lives. And it was just a great episode for action, sci-fi, body horror, Batman moments, the whole team, which again, a lot of people would have looked at this as a throwaway episode, but I really, really enjoyed it. I don't think there are any throwaway episodes here. I think that you can find a lot of key themes and a lot of points of exploration here in any episode, especially with the depth with which we talk about it. But we can find the themes of sort of like understanding your own self and your own heart, knowing what to expect when you go into something as perilous and as unlikely as love. You can find a little bit of wisdom there because Batman has to sort of deal with his own emotional state as well as villain of the week growing plant people for spy work and infiltration, because that's ultimately what we get. We get a return of Poison Ivy there with her immense strangling man-eating plants there attacking Tim and Barbara just as they start to figure out what got on the fringes of the plan.
And isn't it great the way that, just like they were taught, just like their mentor works, that when they were attacked and horrifically overpowered by these vines and giant jaw-crushing plant creatures, that they used what was at hand, Ivy's own chemicals that she experimented with to defeat the plants, and then weaponized those to fight the pod people later in the episode. And it's a scene I want to talk about because her level of plant control is truly awesome.
Yeah.
The giant seaweed attacking the ship. The fact that she'd planned a whole cruise for all the rich people that she'd bamboozled into marrying her pod people, and the slow deterioration. I mean, it's brilliantly done where it is horrible. Children might get a bit of a shiver at these. The way that Michael was becoming a plant, and when Bruce confronted his wife, Susan, and she began to deteriorate as well. It was brilliantly done, I thought.
Yeah, there's always a bit of the uncanny and a bit of the unlikely, sort of something that looks human and looks real, but super duper isn't. There's always going to be a level of that freaks a person out. Makes me think a lot back to the last big comic event that you and I attended together, how our driving buddy put on John Carpenter's The Thing for us. You never know who to trust, even if it looks like it's wearing a human face. But that ultimately led to an action-packed sort of ending there, and I don't know why, but I thought that the actual defeat of these plant people, them sort of dissolving in the red goo, in the red chemical acid substance, there's a little bit of that was like quite unnerving. I mean, like they weren't fully people, but like,
oh, absolutely,
that kind of treatment was a very dark way for the Bat family to handle it. But those kinds of people were manipulators, mind controllers, and they've been okay with using strong forces to deal with monstrous types in the past. So it works out that they went to that method.
Yeah, and it is quite strong. You're absolutely correct. But to me, as fans of stuff like Doctor Who, we know that kids like being scared. It's stimulating. It pumps the adrenaline and makes you enjoy the show. So I do think it was just on the right side of safe. But another thing that really stuck out to me, and I don't know if you spotted it as well, you probably would have because you're very smart, but all the other spouses were playing a role and they were using their partners. I honestly did get a sense of real love from the Sam pod person, Bruce's wife, because how can you do this to me? I'm your wife. That whole stuff like that, lines like that. And that really hit home as well, because I felt pain and loss from both of them. And that, again, is what added a completely separate layer of depth to this episode for me.
Yeah, it got made abundantly clear when Bruce first stepped foot on that cruise, because those other two men sort of talked about how, I had this negative quality, but my wife sort of ignores it. It's great. And the other one was like, I don't really like this sort of thing. And I just sort of look past it. But then when it gets to the reveal that they're all these weird plant people, the one wife is like, cheapskate, I'll be having fun spending your money now. They were playing a role, but I think ultimately all Bruce really needs is just a moment of calm and quiet and peace in and amongst his time being Batman. And that was something that his pod wife was able to do just by virtue of being there and by having a calming effect from the poison ivy pheromones. So that was something she was able to do, and that's why the connection was so quick and so natural. So yeah, there was a sense of loss there. That makes sense to me.
I'm really glad you said that, because in that case, do you think as well that that moment of Bruce stepping away from being Batman for a few weeks or whatever it was cathartic to him, did make him stronger, fuel his resolve, and then make him a better Batman afterwards. Because I honestly feel that way.
I think so too. I think it's important for anyone who does anything intensive to take natural breaks, to step away. I know, I imagine Bruce has natural recuperation time sort of as it is. I feel like you have to keep it realistic, but he's also emotionally recovered from something like this. He's been humbled by the fact that he could feel that way one day. Someone like that could come along, because he's had those kinds of feelings in the past, as you talked about in Phantasm. But just actually having that moment of calm and quiet and peace is something that he knows that he can find one day, and maybe he'll get there. Hopefully he will, and he can go into that knowing he can find that one day, and his resolve as a crime fighter is restored.
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely. So obviously we're going to have some hot takes later, so I'm going to save my next one for the actual moment. But let's talk about the fantastic action scene that closes the episode. Obviously, when they're on the cruise ship and the giant seaweed monster's attacking. And maybe I'm just a big kid or a massive Batman fanboy, but the second that Babs and Tim turned up in the Batwing, I just squeed. And when they chucked him down his Batman uniform, again, for me, it felt, yes, he's back. This is going to go the way it's supposed to. And again, it's moments like that that really, really showcase how much love there is from all the creators of this show for these characters and how well they know them.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of care and attention and appreciation there. There's just so a strong understanding of what the characters are like, sort of just hearing and feeling them from so many years of comics book history, and all of the episodes that we've got of this show. There's a real strong appreciation there. So the need to just go in there and be peacekeepers and help the hostages and just sort of keep the plant people at back, that's not the usual action sequence you'd ever expect from a show like this, but it's one that makes a lot of sense. So it makes excellent viewing. And then eventually we get the sort of back and forth between them and the main plant people using the red stuff, Poison Ivy trying her best. And I'll save one detail I really want to talk about for my own hot take. But yeah, it's a very unlikely way to sort of end an episode, but it makes one a lot of sense to me, and I was really happy to see it.
It was really, really good fun. Okay, in that case then, before we go to our hot takes, let's talk about the cast. Obviously, it's the usual suspects. Obviously, you've got Batman, Bruce, Dick, Tim, Barbara, and Veronica Vreeland. But obviously, the two main guests are obviously Veronica's husband and Bruce's wife. And I don't know if you recognise the name of the husband, but again, as I said, TV and movie and voice acting royalty, to be fair. Tim Matheson. He's been going since the 60s.
The name does ring a bell.
Put it this way, he's one of those leading actors that, to me, back in the 80s when they first touted the Batman movie before they cast Michael Keaton, was one of the people I thought he would make an amazing Batman. He's just got the whole look, and still, even in his 70s, he could make a dashing older superhero. He's just one of those brilliant actors. I mean, let's go through some of his credits. For example, back when you were a child, we used to watch a series called Johnny Quest. Well, back in the 60s, Tim Matheson was the original Johnny Quest from the classic 1960s, a little bit darker, a little bit edgier animated series. He was fantastic. He was Otter, one of the main characters in one of our favourite films, National Lampoon's Animal House.
Ah, brilliant.
He starred in Stephen King's 1941, was in West Wing for years, won awards for it. The Virginian, Night Gallery, Bonanza. He played Maxwell Lord in Justice League Unlimited. And he's an accomplished director as well, directing episodes of The Twilight Zone, Burn Notice, and West Wing. And he was a Jarvis Cord in an episode of The Brave and the Bold featuring the Blue Beetle as well.
Yes, I do remember that episode quite well.
To fans of TV today, he's one of the main characters and leads in your mum's favourite show and a show that I love as well, unapologetically. He's Doc in Virgin River. So like I said, he's been working constantly since the 60s and he's still kicking ass and taking no prisoners. So, yeah, do look him up, Tim Matheson, Matheson, especially even his 70s and 80s period, and you'll see, yeah, he would have made an amazing superhero, a great Batman or Superman.
Well, if he's still got that gravitas and that acting chops behind him, he may fit well as an aging Bruce Wayne against Batman Beyond.
Yeah. Oh, that would be good. Obviously, with Kevin Conroy gone, everyone's favourite choice would be Michael Keaton, but I'd take Tim Matheson, absolutely. He really looks like an older Bruce Wayne. Now, I'm going to say this next name, and you're going to know who she is immediately, because she is, for us, a legend, someone we adore, a fantastic award-winning actress. The voice talent that played Susan, Bruce's wife, is none other than Linda Hamilton.
Oh, wow.
Living legend. I mean, you know someone's great when their first movie is a Stephen King horror film. She was in The Children of the Corn. She's in King Kong Lives, Dante's Peak, the brilliant 80s TV series Beauty and the Beast. She was Catherine Chandler, Beauty, to Ron Perlman's Beast. He was like a lion hero creature who used to ride the subways in New York. Great TV show. She's the obviously evil general in Resident Alien, a show you and I love. She's going to be in the final season of Stranger Things, which she's fangirling about because apparently she loves the show a great deal. She's won Saturn Awards, Golden Globe Awards, Primetime Emmy Awards. She's going to appear again in Batman Beyond, and she was in several episodes of Disney's Hercules. And of course, for you and I, she will always be one of the greatest movie heroines in history, up there with Ellen Ripley for me. She is Sarah Connor in the Terminator movies. And what a voice. I mean, her voice performance in this episode, sultry, dark, attractive, yet terrifying. It was just everything you wanted it to be, wasn't it?
Yeah, because you never expect that from the talent behind Sarah Connor. You just expect that sort of level of determination. But then again, she's a rounded professional who's done all kinds of characters across her tenured career. So yeah, a great performance there and a great deal of respect. I presume it's been the same voice behind Poison Ivy for this episode as it has been for the whole season as far.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's the same actors as we're used to. Yeah, the classic Poison Ivy, definitely.
Yeah, but that's just the quality of the voice direction here. There's such a clear sound for all of these characters that everything just makes sense and fits and feels natural.
Absolutely. I mean, strong acting from everyone. And I do think as well, even though they weren't front and center, Kevin Conroy's performance in this episode, for me, is one of his best ever. The emotion he puts behind Bruce's dialogue, which is going to be one of my hot takes when we get to it next, just blew me away. And I miss him and love him dearly. So, Kevin, again, thank you. Incredible. So, what were your hot takes? What were your favourite moments, good, bad, or ugly, from Chemistry?
I appreciate, as an old and education-beaten literature student, I appreciate a good use of narrative circularity. So we saw at the beginning of the episode when Bruce/Batman was distracted, it took Tim to save him with a well-timed batarang over his shoulder to get the bad guys off his case. But the moment later on the subway, on the cruise ship rather, where Tim was distracted as well, a well-timed batarang from out of nowhere from Batman sort of proved to me, yes, the trouble is over. Batman's no longer distracted. He is back. Just a little bit of symbolism there that I'll always welcome, and a layer of literary depth you'd never expect from Saturday morning cartoon television.
Yeah, and you and I have both said it since this season started. The level of training and teamwork between Bruce, Dick, Tim, and Babs in this season has been nothing short of phenomenal, and almost non-verbal communication at times. And the way they work together in this episode, again, highlights that beautifully. Well said. Totally agree. Now, my hot take, again, goes back to that classic scene in the cave between Bruce and his proteges. And it's something I never thought I'd ever hear outside the comics, where Bruce says that sooner or later he would pass this on and all of you would take over. That gave me goosebumps. That to me was like, damn, these guys really get it. We all know that, sadly, heartbreakingly, he probably will be Batman until the day he dies. But the fact that he does have a plan, he trained these people, he trusts them and loves them enough to take over his crusade, that to me was, again, one of those things that elevates this action-packed, like you call blockbuster swashbuckling episode, into something far, far more than that. That to me was one of my favourite moments of this entire season. I can't lie. I really, really loved it.
Yeah, it was really well handled. Just riverboat journey into Batman's sort of emotional experience and how well he would handle something like this. And it's a great stat to sort of see him handle this emotional weight of it, but also come through and rely on the strength of the team around him. So we're really fortunate that we're able to explore these kinds of themes in what would otherwise be fairly light television, but is always exciting.
It's things like that that really highlight to me that this is definitely, without a doubt, one of, if not the best superhero animated series in the history of the medium. It is fantastic. It
really is.
We always say second only to the comics. I think at certain stages it's as good. And
I can agree. I can see that.
Yeah. And when you get the spin-off comics that came out of it being every bit as strong, that's when you realise that this is a special piece of TV history, and one I'm so glad that you love as much as I do and get to talk about with me on a weekly basis. So thank you for that.
Always happy to talk about well-written stories about a beloved character that means a lot to both of us. It's a rare thing that a character just gets this kind of treatment, to have a consistently good narrative story just written around them. So we're welcome to see it, and I'm excited to cover the last few little drips.
Yes, heartbreakingly, readers, listeners, viewers, fans of Batman the Animated Series. I don't know if, well, obviously, depending on schedules, you probably wouldn't have heard it yet. Oh, no, you would have heard it yet. This will come out after. Brad and I recorded the latest episode of the DC Comics News podcast a couple of days back. And that's when Adam and I realised as well that there are only 2 episodes of the show proper left. So it's a deep emotional moment. And then, of course, we're going to go on to the 3 animated movies, World's Finest, the Superman Batman movie, which is one of the best ever. And the audience-dividing mystery of the Batwoman, but those are coming next. But then, viewers, listeners, it's down to you. What do we do next? We are going to take a brief hiatus, have a rest for a month or 2 to recharge our batteries and decide whether you want us to. Let us know, message us to continue and go beyond the night with Batman Beyond. And that's the favourite course of action. But let us know what you'd like us to do. Do you want us to cover a couple of the comics, some of the big stories that tie in with the animated series? Let us know and we will listen. But until that time, Adam, let them all know where to hear your dulcet heroic tones, see your heroic visage, and read your wonderful words.
I do many things across the great wide interwebs for those who wish to find it. You can find me looking at more DC Comics flavored things. My reviews over on Dark Knight News. Both Catwoman and Red Hood are in excellent spots right now. But for my one true love, PC and tabletop gaming, look no further than to our pride and joy, fantasticuniverses.com, where I give my 2 cents on weird independent comics, PC, console, tabletop, and every kind of gaming in between. Follow me on Twitter at IsItTinkerer, the artist formerly known as Twitter, as it were, putting in my own 2 cents on those fine things. Find my supplements for your own TTRPG goodness on Storyteller's Forge, and coming soon to earwaves near you, something very exciting that I will allude to when I'm allowed to.
Marvellous. And in the meantime, type Steve J. Ray or Fantastic Universes into Google or your search engine of choice to take you across my podcasts and writing across our baby Fantastic Universes, the wonderful DC Comics News and Dark Knight News as well. You can catch this show and the DC Comics News podcast on the DC Comics News Podcast Network on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever you get your shows. And obviously, again, you can see the dynamic duo of Adam and Steve on YouTube if you're brave enough. But until you do, Adam reigns the night. Together, we are the night. And this has been the I Am the Night podcast.
Thank you for listening. And until next time,
read
more
comics
and watch
more
Batman.
Batman.